Welcome to the Wealth Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, John Lawson, Senior Wealth Advisor at Asante Capital Management and Sauna Family Office. We're always looking for unique ways to educate our client families and be introduced to new clients. At Sauna Family Office, we help business owners and affluent families navigate the complexities of wealth through a variety of wealth management and family enterprise oversight services. Today, we're going to delve into the world of mental performance coaching. Everybody accepts a sports team needs a coach to help bring the best out of them, but only some people accept that it helps individuals. Some of the most successful individuals have coaches. So I brought on Dr. Kolin Kriitmaa today to talk to us about what a consultant in this field does and who is it suited for. Welcome, Kolin, and thanks for being our guest today. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about you and your background?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. It's always nice to talk, performance and how the mental game or the mental side of it, has some impact. A little bit about me. I'm sports guy first and foremost. I played junior hockey, played rugby, played a number of sports growing up. Went off to university after my hockey career ended. Did a bachelor's degree in physiology. I did a master's degree in coaching science, and then actually went into coaching as a career for about the first 10 years of my career. From there, I went off to do a few other different odd jobs here and there as I was trying to figure out what to do. And I ended up working with the National Hockey League player agency. And throughout that experience, realized and recognized that, sport and performance psychology was really what the athletes were lacking at that time. So, I had also done my MBA, and when my wife decided to go back and do her MBA, she chose the same MBA program as I did. So I knew what her time commitment was. And I started looking at some sports psychology stuff and then kind of fell into the program. And, here I am today, proud to say that, in 23 or whatever years it's been in my working career, I've never not worked a day in sports. So it's been good. But, that's a little bit about my background. What's super fascinating is, in the last 4 or 5 years, seen a big shift in, not just sport and performance psychology, but performance. Because the reality is, there's things like first responders or even business. People have to perform, and performance doesn't delineate between sport and non-sport. Performance is performance. So it's been super interesting to kind of get into the business side of sport the last few years and help a few, corporate type clients and executives do their thing.
That's fascinating. Thanks for that. And also kind of leads into my next question or point is, well, first of all, why do individuals hire you? And then who's somebody who would most benefit? You alluded to that a little bit, but can you expand?
Well, I'll give you a couple silly little analogies. When your sink breaks and you have water running everywhere, what do? You call a plumber. But the plumber doesn't come with one wrench. They come with a toolbox full of tools. And then they look at the job, assess what's going on, and use the right tool or tools to fix what's happening and for the situation. And so I always like to use the plumber analogy, because what we want to do when it comes to performance, you want to have a toolbox with a number of tools in it, because oftentimes, the way the world works in life in today's day and age, it's not one tool that'll solve any problem. You need a kind of a plethora of them to deal with it. So my plumber analogy is one that I use quite regularly because it's simple and people can understand it. The other thing that I always think about is, I always say to high school students, pick a hard subject in school like physics or, calculus or something like that. And that your goal is to get 95% in that class, but you study as hard as you can and you only get 85. What do you do to get the other 10%? You hire a tutor. Well, a mental performance consultant is the tutor to get you that extra 10%. And often in sport, that's the difference between, an Olympic medal and not getting an Olympic medal, or a Stanley Cup and not getting a Stanley Cup or something like that. And on the business side, that's the difference between companies that excel and thrive and companies that are just kind of pushing the issue every day.
Great analogies. And so maybe I'll a little additional question to that is then, when you're working more on the business side, are you typically working with the individuals or a team?
You know what? That's a fascinating question. It's a little bit of both. It has been my experience. Usually when it's working with teams, it's often communication, leadership, and culture building. When it's with individuals, it's performance based things, hitting targets, work with a lot of salespeople so they set proper goals and all those types of things. But at the end of the day, I think the three buckets, if you want to call it that I work in, obviously one is sport, two is business, and I actually kind of put first responders into that third bucket, because at the end of the day, they're probably the most important performance profession out there. You show up to a nasty, accident scene or whatever, they have to build resilience. So for first responders, the primary thing becomes resilience. For business, the primary thing becomes dealing with stress. And then for athletes, it's pressure. And I always equate stress and pressure a little bit differently, because to me, pressure is something you put on yourself. So what athlete doesn't want to perform well in sport? Stress is usually external. Like COVID was an external thing to all of us. That's what created stress. And so if you think of stress and pressure, just as simple as that, it has a big, it can kind of delineate between those three buckets of, performance domains or performance groups that I work with. But at the end of the day, performance is performance. It really doesn't matter what, walk of life you are. To me, what I think the world has really come to grips with post-COVID is, performance and well-being, I should say thriving, I guess. If you want to be a thriving individual, whether, whatever your chosen walk of life is, it's about well-being and performance, and the intersection of those two, that's where thriving is. And ultimately, I think that's the best way to explain, what I do with athletes. And then, the mental skills becomes, the tools. And, when you're talking about business, to get into that more specifically, a lot of businesses, mission, vision, values, you start there, and it's crazy to think how often mission, vision, and values get tested. Just last week, I had somebody tell me they watched recently the new BlackBerry documentary or movie or whatever it was, and just how their mission, vision, and values was challenged all the time, and the demise of BlackBerry. So, usually that's where it starts on the business side, and then it becomes, coaching for performance.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So maybe to delve on the two spectrums of what you do in terms of how it affects you, what do you find to be the most difficult part of being a mental performance consultant?
Probably time. Sometimes it's time on me. The moment when it comes to sports, it puts me on the road a little bit. In the winter, I'm often on the road 14, 16 days a month. So that eliminates a little bit of time. But then the time to really connect with your clients and give them the opportunity to get meaningful conversations back with you. But then the other side of it is often the time issue becomes on the client, because they're busy people. So, how do busy people find time to structure this into their day? Well, we know that the research shows how, taking care of sleep, nutrition, hydration is a performance factor. How many executives aren't getting enough sleep because they're stressed out at night? Or, as an example, the tip of the day I always say to people for when I didn't sleep well last night, I was too many thoughts going on in my head. Well, get out of bed and write everything down. As soon as you write everything down, you get out of your own head. And so, I think the most difficult thing is time, whether it's that my clients want more time of mine, or vice versa, they can't figure out or find enough time for themselves to properly, get into this whole thing. The clients that do find the time usually thrive really quickly, and a lot of good stories that I could tell kind of go through that.
Yeah, well, your point about time hits home. I see it with my clients, and I feel it on my own. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
So let's go the flip side. What do you find the most fascinating and rewarding part about being a mental performance consultant?
Yeah. So I'll give you kind of two perspectives on that, or two perspectives. When I'm dealing with high school aged athletes, it's really rewarding when parents phone me and say, I don't know what you're talking about with my kid, but I sure see a change at home. That to me is the number one reward. When I'm dealing with, adults, business people, adult athletes, or even first responders, usually it's the stories they come back with. Hey, I was in this situation and I used this, and this tool to get out of it. And I'm like, okay, it's one thing to learn something, it's another to learn and be able to apply it. And so when I'm dealing with mature individuals, it's really they're coming back to me and their ability to apply, to explain to me how they were able to apply something we've been working on. To me, that's the rewarding thing on the other side of it.
Yeah, and that again, that just so hits home. How many times do you go to, whether it's a conference or even a small session, and you see the whole group nodding, writing things down furiously? They're learning so much, and there's great nuggets and really step-by-step explanation of how to succeed in doing something. But how many of those people actually go back and apply it?
Yeah. Well, and
Virtually zero.
what I think that the biggest learning tool is self-reflection, just taking time to reflect on different things. One thing that I use with my clients of all walks of life is how many of you actually use a notebook and a pen. We're so digitized with everything, and how about just write down your thoughts in the morning, your thoughts at night? Like, journaling becomes a big thing for people. And I'm one of those people who loves efficiency, and I've tried every day timer humanly possible. And there's some great ones out there that have different things that you can do in a day. Write down your top 3 must do's today, a reflection at the end of the day, all those types of things. But I like the power of 3. If you want to learn something, you got to learn it 3 different ways at 3 different times and at 3 different depths. And if you make things simple enough to be in lists of 3, you'll never forget 3. But the moment you start getting north of 3, it becomes a little bit harder. So the power of 3 is a big thing that I like to work with on my clients, because if you only do 3 things that move the needle on your business today, chances are you're going to move the needle on the business. If you have a list of 10 things on the business and you're so conflicted on where to go with each one, you're not going to, get anywhere. Now, I think that there's lots of, pop psychology and all these different things. They'll say, just focus on one big thing for the day. And, I think that's where you start. But, business and life are busy, and they're challenging. So, I like the power of 3, because it solves a few other problems too.
Yep. Yeah, it's doable. It doesn't overwhelm you, but you don't tend to stray. I hear you on the one big thing, and I get the psychology behind it, but the business owners or performance type people who want to really excel have a tough time. They become a squirrel. It's 3. Well, just meant, no, I really should be doing this. So that 3 at least allows us to expand the focus a little bit. And interestingly enough, that is what I do as well.
Yeah, very cool.
So when we talk about sport, that was your first love, but you've gone into found that professionals, whether they be entrepreneurs or business executives, and then you also talked about first responders. Does your approach differ to each bucket, as you called it? And if so, how?
Yeah, not really. I use a coaching process that is very, co-creation with, a coaching client or an athlete or whoever. And it really revolves around four things. First is assess what's going on. Second is align. Third is monitor. Fourth is evaluate. So assess, align, monitor, evaluate. And if you think of that in a circle, that's continuous. And you're always trying to balance out planning, implementing, and execution of it. It's a nice little coaching process, if you want to call it that. I think what I think I alluded to earlier, but to reiterate it again, if it's sport, it usually revolves around pressure and confidence. If it's business, it usually revolves around stress and mission, vision, values, like as a starting point. And then if it's first responders, it usually starts with resilience, and then we go from there. And so what's fascinating is pressure and confidence impacts business, pressure and confidence impacts first responders. And so it just so happens in those three areas, that's where we often start, but they're all interchangeable because, as I said earlier, performance is performance. It doesn't matter whether you are a surgeon, an aircraft control tower person helping to land a plane, or you're an athlete. So there's a lot of crossover.
That's great points. Thanks. Gives a better perspective, at least for myself. So, and that does kind of move into the next area I just wanted to touch on. And just so people understand who are listening and watching, what does a relationship with you look like? Is it long-term? Is it short-term? What's the process that you typically go through, or are there different versions for different circumstances?
Yeah, there's definitely different versions for different circumstances. The best way I can explain to your or answer your question would be proactive and reactive. So a lot of people come to me when in a reactive sense, something's broken and I need it fixed. And then when it's fixed, they move on. The clients that I have that thrive the most, they're the ones that come with a proactive approach. They want to, continuous improvement, growth mindset. They're building something. They're, as I'm sure you've experienced, as you develop, yourself as a person over the years, it usually impacts what you do at work, family, relationships, you name it. And so, personal development, that becomes the proactive approach. So sometimes they come as a reactive approach, they fix it, but then realize how powerful it was and stay on a little bit longer term. So I think really it's either, assessing with a client, is this a reactive thing or a proactive thing? And so reactive clients often, spend 6, 8, 10 sessions with me over, course of 6, 8, 10 weeks. And then those, proactive clients, it's an ongoing relationship month over month. And, when I got into this whole thing, it was, pre-COVID, this whole notion of, mental performance, over the internet and Zoom was, I wouldn't say frowned upon, but it was still relatively new and or not a thing. It was still, hey, let's talk in person, whatever else. COVID's been so fascinating for the business. So it really has opened it up. And, my goal and objective was, why can't we do this on the internet or Zoom or using technology? And so I was already moving that direction before COVID. And my objective was mostly because of athletes. An athlete doesn't want to book an appointment. Oh, I need to see the mental performance person. I need to book an appointment on Tuesday at 2:30. It's like, I had a bad game. I need to talk now. That might be Saturday night at 10:30 p.m. when they're standing outside the bus, waiting for the team to finish, getting out of the arena. So I've always tried to make it accessible with technology type stuff. And I think that has really made for a much more robust and, better strategy with clients for, dealing with things when you need to deal with them. because oftentimes if you let the mind run rampant, that's actually where a lot of things go sideways.
That's where the damage happens. Absolutely. So throw a little bit of a twist and question in here is, you're a business owner. And so we're often on these podcasts where there's a lot of business owners that listen. What's your, as a business owner, what's kind of the most effective tool that you used to help excel your business? So I'm talking for you personally, not for your clients.
When I got into the psychology thing, I really gravitated towards the notion of mental models. And, think back to when you're in grade school, whatever test you take, the teacher has an answer key. That's the mental model. So, what's super interesting for me in my business, and I teach 4 or 5 mental models to groups and teams and executives, because if you can have a mental model how you approach everything, then it's actually easy to implement strategies and use tools to help solve problems. Because the famous football coach Nick Saban there and down in the US college ranks, he always says football is a fascinating game. 10 players go to the left and 1 player goes to the right. The play doesn't work. And now you have to solve a problem. And so business is all about solving problems on a regular basis. And usually those that solve problems the quickest, they're the ones that are agile and adjust their sails to where the wind is. So for me, the whole notion of mental models when I'm working with people, mental model on managing thoughts and emotions, mental model on dealing with your mindset, mental model on, focus and concentration, mental model on mental flexibility. So I have all these 4 or 5 mental models, which I use personally every day, and I teach them to my clients. And, what often happens is I'll work with an executive or, a business client on this, and they're like, oh, you need to teach my team this. So we are all talking the same language. Now we're solving problems, because if, you say tomato and I say tomato, we're not really on the same page. We're close, but we're not quite there. And that's where miscommunication in teams and business occurs.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I really like that one. Thanks for sharing that. So Colin, tell me, if someone wants to get more information or contact you, how do they go about that?
Yeah, there's two ways you can get a hold of me. If you want to check out the sports minded stuff, it's fortitude365.com. And, a lot of my corporate and, individual work with business first responder type people, you can check me out at kolinkriitmaa.com. That's KOLINKRIITMAA.com. And those are probably the best 2 ways. And both those websites have links to, get a hold of me and connect, and would love to chat with anybody and see if we can co-create something special for you.
That's perfect. Thanks so much, Colin, for taking the time today. Really appreciate it. And I said this before, but I learned just as much as everybody else. And that's why I love doing these podcasts. Thanks for being on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
A big thank you to Dr. Kolin Kriitmaa for helping us understand the world of mental performance coaching. If you want to know more about Colin and his areas of expertise, look him up on the 2 websites that he provided us with, and we put on the screen for you now. Our next planned podcast will check in on the markets. Where are we now, and what does the future hold for us? Ultimately, our goal is to educate and engage you, our audience. If you have any topics you would like us to dive deeper into, please let us know. If you could take a moment to post a review, it would be much appreciated. If you would like to have access to other videos or podcasts, or even articles that we have done, visit us at sanafamilyoffice.com, SANA familyoffice.com. And for those of you who don't know the origin of the name Sana Family Office, it stems from the meaning of asante, which is Swahili for thank you. However, the most commonly spoken phrase in the Swahili language regarding asante is asante sana, which means thank you very much. The name represents our gratitude towards all of the families and business owners who have chosen our team as their trusted advisory council. Until next time, Asante Sana.
Hi, I'm Trevor Beggs from Sana Family Office, and thanks for listening to John Lawson and the Wealth Wisdom Podcast. Here are the necessary disclosures. Asante Capital Management is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund and Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada. This material is provided for general information and is subject to change without notice. Every effort has been made to compile this material from reliable sources. However, no warranty can be made as to its accuracy or completeness. Before acting on any of the above, please make sure to see a professional advisor for individual financial advice based on your personal circumstances. The opinions expressed here are not necessarily those of Asante Capital Management. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Wealth Wisdom Podcast.